Hello, and welcome back to your weekly astrology podcast, where we weave the transits of the week into the rhythm of the lunar phases. I am your host, Sarah Paasch, and this week's bringing us to the final phase of this Cancer lunar cycle. I'm curious, last week we covered that Capricorn full moon and the constructive feedback that this full moon revealed with Saturn stationing retrograde in Aries and Jupiter rising into visibility in the morning sky. Comment below if you felt any of these loving reality checks on better preparing for future scaling and success last week. Where is life inviting you to slow down and listen for adjustments in your strategy? Let's talk about it. This week's episode brings us into the third quarter lunar phase with the moon in Aries, and it's all about learning and listening for ways to work smarter, not harder. The third quarter lunar phase is always about focusing on refinement, integration of new awareness throughout this cycle, clearing space, and letting go to bring things into completion before we jump into the next lunar cycle and the next new moon. All of this week's major transits just so happen to amplify and support the themes of a third quarter lunar phase, so much so that if we aren't careful, we might go a little overboard and we might just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Before we jump in, just a little reminder that if you enjoy this podcast and this channel, it really helps support me and the channel. If you like this video, if you subscribe to the channel and you turn your notifications on or share the video with your friends and loved ones. And with that, we're going to go ahead. We're going to dive right into this third quarter lunar phase. We start this week on Thursday, July 17th, with the moon in Aries making that final waning square to the sun in Cancer. On the day of this third quarter lunar phase beginning, we've got Mercury in Leo stationing retrograde. Mercury is going to station retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo at 9:44 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Mercury retrograde is a 3-week cycle that happens often. I mean, it's the most often retrograde that we get from any of those faster moving planets. Mercury retrogrades 3 to 4 times a year. And this is a 3-week time where on one hand, it might feel like we're getting delays. Mercury has to do with communications and travel. And so sometimes we feel that sense of needing to slow down or things forcing us to slow down because they're not working like they usually do. And this Mercury retrograde specifically is really a cycle, I think, that's going to be helping us focus on implementing some of that Capricorn full moon constructive feedback that we hopefully were available to receive. And we can use these 3 weeks for really reviewing, researching, and reorganizing using that feedback, specifically around some Leo themes of leadership, our roles or the roles of our priorities, our ambitions. And also, I think there's going to be a lot during this Mercury retrograde on not just finding your own voice. Maybe there's a new voice within you that wants to emerge, or it's reclaiming an old voice that has been shy up until this point. But it's also finding and taking that stage. Like, where is your voice ready to take a new stage or take a stage in a new way? And this week specifically, the first step is really to slow down and pay attention to what gets in the way of us having not only a confident idea or a confident perception or outlook, but communicating it in an effective way or implementing it in an effective way. So that theme of constructive feedback, we want to keep that handy. We want to keep that around and really be active listeners as we enter into the first week of the Mercury retrograde, the last week of this Cancer lunar cycle, and this third quarter lunar phase. Those dates for this Mercury retrograde is going to be from this Thursday, July 17th through August 11th. And it's going to be retrograde from 15 degrees of Leo all the way back to 4 degrees of Leo. What's really interesting about this Mercury retrograde is that Mercury is really not making a whole lot of aspects or really communicating with a whole lot of planets during this cycle. The only aspects to other planets that Mercury has during this retrograde is a sextile to Venus, which is happening basically at the time Mercury is stationing. We'll get into that. It's going to have its conjunction with the sun at the halfway point of the retrograde. This is our Hazimi, or our inferior conjunction with the sun. And then after that, it doesn't make any other aspects until it stations direct. It's going to station direct at 4 degrees of Leo. And then pretty much immediately after stationing, Mercury is going to make a sextile to Mars twice, because Mercury is going to pick up speed. So this kind of tells us that Mercury retrograde, it's always a time to slow down, to do more of that review process, the research process, to get organized behind the scenes so that we can be ready to really implement them in a new way after Mercury stations direct. But I think that's really emphasized even more because it begins with a supportive aspect to the receptive planet Venus. And then it's not until after it stations direct that it makes that supportive aspect to the active, the action-oriented planet Mars. So really holding that in the backdrop of this Mercury retrograde, if things are coming up that you feel excited to take action on, or you feel a little bit of an impulse to want to go ahead and just say the thing that you're thinking, I'm going to caution you, what would it take to hold that clarity a little bit longer? To not rush to put anything into action, and to wait until Mercury stations direct, because there's an indication with this astrology that the momentum and the flow is going to be a lot smoother, a lot easier, if we're willing to let it bake just a little bit longer. On Friday, July 18th, the moon is going to shift into Taurus. And on this day, Venus in Gemini is making that sextile to Mercury retrograde, the Mercury that just stationed retrograde like last night. And a few things about this that I love. I mean, first of all, Venus is a helpful planet on its own. A sextile is an aspect of the nature of Venus. And Mercury just stationed. Mercury is in a position where it's not ready to just move forward. It's actually being asked to turn around, do some reflection, do some reviewing, and it's getting this initial tip off from the Venus in Gemini. It's almost as if there's this helpful remembering. Maybe there's a conversation or there's information that comes to you that provides you something that you were previously missing about a previous experience. The thing is that sometimes we go through an experience and we have this idea of what happened or our perception, and that we feel really confident in it. And sometimes in retrospect, we get a new perspective. We look back and we're able to reframe and reorganize our original conception of what happened. This supportive sextile from Venus feels like it's stopping Mercury for a second before Mercury goes into the retrograde. Venus is kind of saying, I want you to look at something that's really familiar to you, but I actually want to give you an idea of how to look at it from an unfamiliar vantage point or perception. And this really feels helpful because instead of going into a Mercury retrograde feeling super confident and just trudging forward and then feeling thrown off course because of the delays or the unexpected things that come up during the Mercury retrograde, Venus is like, hey, this is where you need to be curious, or how, if you're curious here, it's really going to help you get the most out of the reviews that you're going into. It's going to make you more receptive to the things that you either need to learn or to relearn, and really think about your role in the participation of things during this Mercury retrograde. So on Friday, on Venus's day, how can you make yourself available? How can you make yourself receptive in that Venusian way to really ask questions that are going to help you go through this Mercury retrograde to get the most out of it? What's going to help me go through this with as little resistance and struggle as possible? The thing with Venus in Gemini is she is the social butterfly. She is stimulated by intellectual conversations and connections. And so I'm really going to work with this transit, and I encourage you to do the same, is how can you put yourself into thought-provoking conversations? Is there somebody that you could ask for an idea or a resource? Just really thinking about ways that you can stimulate your ability to think about familiar things in unfamiliar ways. I think the most helpful thing we all can do on working with this transit is remembering that it's really trying to support us and help us go into the retrograde as much as it can. So just know there's something trying to help you. There's some piece of information. There's some sort of reframe or perspective. Something is trying to come to help you. You just got to make yourself available for it. And then you have to be willing to hold it, to implement it, and use it over the next 3 weeks of that retrograde. And then on Sunday, July 20th, this theme is kind of getting reactivated because the moon's going to go into Gemini. And this waning moon, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to conjunct Uranus that just entered Gemini. And this is important to pay attention to because Uranus just entered Gemini, and this is the first time that the moon is going to be making that conjunction and crossing Uranus, which is really going to be giving us some potential data about what that 7-year transit in our charts is going to look and feel like. So notice what's happening, notice how you're feeling, notice the people that are around or the conversations that are happening. And also, while that moon is in Gemini, it's kind of tying and tethering together the other transits of the week. It's ruled by the Mercury that just stationed retrograde. It's making that conjunction to Venus and Gemini, and then it's going to eventually square Mars and Virgo. So Sunday is a good day, again, to really listen and be receptive and just kind of notice, like take note. What is this moon in Gemini wanting me to hear, wanting me to see, wanting me to engage in a new level of curiosity around? On that same day, on Sunday, if you recall in the beginning, I talked about work smarter, not harder. And then I also talked about caution with not going overboard and throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, this is a point where we want to really refine. We want to let go. We want to release things that are not going to serve our growth or the future cycle. And this is one of those transits I was saying that's really amplifying that. And that's Mars in Virgo making a conjunction to the South Node. This Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo feels like it could be taking the idea of eliminating something bad so far that we accidentally eliminate something good along with it. So there's this caution that we want to have. Yes, use this transit to release, to let go, to eliminate what's not working, to really identify, what is it that's kind of blocking or inhibiting my ability to really move forward in the most efficient, clear, and focused way. We just want to be mindful that we don't go overboard, that we're not so quick to jump the gun on saying, this is bad, I'm getting rid of it, and never looking back. There might be a need to just be a little bit discerning about the elimination process or the detox process to make sure that we're not going too fast, too far with that Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo. And the South Node is this point that is a release point in the chart and in the sky. And I guess one way that I'm really sitting and thinking with this idea of letting go of the South Node and this Mars conjunction is this idea of actually stepping away, walking away, like really taking space in order to get clarity before moving forward. So it's almost like Virgo is all about the details. Virgo is all about seeing the trees, not the forest. And this Mars South Node conjunction in Virgo is almost like this indication that we are very lost in the trees right now. So this day, what would it be like if we use this transit to step away and during that time, just come back to rest in the awareness of the forest, of the matter? Right? Like, where have we been blinded by the trees of our reality? Where have we been so hyper-focused on some details or some components of our strategy that maybe we've lost sight of the bigger picture or the other factors of consideration or voices, ideas of consideration? And how could stepping away give us this opportunity to actually, move us forward? And another thing that I think is going to come up when we get to the end of this lunar phase is this idea of a judgment detox. Virgo is here to discern, to judge, to edit, to refine, to perfect. And also that can be one of the greatest limitations for a Virgo is that the idea of perfection itself is imperfect. And so I feel as though Mars and Virgo conjunct the South Node could also be this indication of where we might benefit from a little bit of a judgment detox. Is there a place in your life where you might be stuck because you're stuck in the idea that you'd rather be right than be happy? I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to drop that there, leave it. We're going to go to the next transit and we'll come back to it. All right, on Tuesday, July 22nd, we've got the moon going into Cancer in its balsamic phase and the sun is entering Leo. Happy birthday, Leos. I love my Leos. Leos are the best, the biggest hearts, the most loyal, and also the only people I know who can get away with doing the things they do. And it's like so cute. If anybody else did it, I'm always like, it'd be so annoying. Like, it'd be so performative and you'd be like, oh my God, can you not? But when a Leo's in a true, authentic authentic expression of themselves. When they're not thinking, when they're just being, everybody knows what I mean. We love a good Leo. And so anyway, so we're back to Tuesday. We're in Leo season. We're at the very, very final phase of this Cancer lunar cycle. The moon is back at home in Cancer. It's going to be co-present and conjunct Jupiter in Cancer, which we know is just newly visible and a little bit more empowered and active. And on Tuesday, something a little bit just more helpful and sweet and supportive is that with that moon in Cancer and the sun now in Leo, we've got our two luminaries dignified at the same time. This is really great because it means that the two people and planets in charge of everything are in a place where they finally feel at home. They have everything they need. And it feels like this final phase of coming together and getting resourced to not only what needs to be completed for the Cancer lunar cycle, but also to set us up for success for the really big Leo new moon and Leo cycle ahead. And on Tuesday, July 22nd, that sun in Leo is immediately going to make a supportive sextile to Uranus and Gemini. First of all, this is at 0 degrees. This is all about the new. This is all about fresh energy. And that's really amplified with the Uranus energy and indications by itself. This is a moment where that sun is being asked to implement something fresh without overturning entirely pre-existing structures and systems. The sun in Leo, sextile Uranus and Gemini, is this wake-up call or this invitation to wake ourselves up and to step into something like a sense of confidence and a sense of identity in a new way, in a fresh way. This has been happening a lot lately, both with myself and a lot with my client work, where there's this invitation for them to show up to a situation in a new way. And they're kind of sitting in this threshold of like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm looking for advice. And so there is kind of this consultant expert vibe, which is good because, you know, we've got the moon conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. So if you need to consult an expert, I mean, by all means, babe, like Tuesday, great day to consult an expert. But I also want you to consider consulting the expert that lives within you, the version of you that already exists, that is inside of you and knows exactly what needs to happen. And maybe today you wake up and you just let yourself admit this new way of being, this new way of thinking, and this new way of handling whatever's coming up. It's ready to actually be activated in some way. So this is like the day of a self-system update. And I love that it's this final hour before we go into the Leo new moon and that Leo cycle, really asking yourself, okay, what identity, what version of myself, what story or idea or way of thinking or communicating, just am I recognizing absolutely needs to be let go? I need to like purge that part of the closet of myself in order to enter into this new cycle, feeling fresh, feeling spacious, feeling more curious and excited and confident that I have what it takes to handle it. We have to like turn that part of ourselves on. And I feel like that's what the sun sextile Uranus is doing. Again, it's like that self-system update or that full software update of who we are and how we're identifying ourselves in the role of participation in whatever's happening in our lives. We're ready to do it different. We're ready to show up different and maybe actually admit to ourselves we can be confident that we do know what to do. The sun in Leo has never had access to Uranus and Gemini, not in my lifetime, not for the last 84 years. So this is something really new for us. This is something where the Leo part of our chart, this place where we need to feel like we have the space and the stage to be ourselves, to creatively express, to be authentic, to be seen, to be appreciated. It's never had this communication line or this reflection point from Uranus and Gemini. So what is it that Uranus and Gemini wants you to see or wants to show you and tell you? And how is that kind of amping you up? Uranus and Gemini is a whole new level of hype queen energy for a version of you that previously you were like maybe a little shy or maybe you only showed it to some people in some places. Now you've got like the right crew to support you, to be like, oh yeah, babe, I got this. We got this. And you're more confident about it. So tell me, like, how are you feeling this? Comment below. Do you feel like you identify with this idea that there's a part of you that already knows what to do? Is there a new part of you coming online? Is there like a system software self update happening? And are you on board? Are you here for it? And the grand finale of this week, really the culmination point of all of these transits, and the culmination, the end point of this Cancer lunar cycle is on Wednesday, July 23rd. We've got Venus and Gemini making a square to Mars and Virgo. Venus and Mars are the lovers in astrology. But when Venus and Mars are in a square, the lovers become the fighters. And instead of having this sexy, creative, flirtatious energy between Venus and Mars, this dance of erotic and attraction, of desire and will, well, when they're in a square, it's a little bit more of a creative tension. This energy is like legitimately tense, and there can be a lot of this sense of creative and sexual tension. And it's happening in these mercurial signs, both Venus and Gemini and Mars and Virgo. And so they have a shared ruler, which is Mercury in Leo, and Mercury just stationed retrograde. This is like nobody is clear. Nobody's on the same page. There are so many mixed messages happening with this Venus square Mars. So Venus is actually catching up to Mars and having this overcoming square to Mars in Virgo. And I was kind of imagining that Venus is like trying to help Mars, trying to give Mars some sort of information, or trying to have this important conversation to get Mars on the same page to help harmonize with everything that's happening, and to really apply this feedback or these feedback loops that could really help everybody moving forward. But Mars is in a square to Venus. Mars doesn't want to hear it. Mars can't hear it. And so I feel like this transit on Wednesday, July 23rd, in a very real way, there's probably going to be some disagreements and misunderstandings coming up, or some intellectual tensions or creative tensions, desire tensions. And so what is it when we think about feedback? What is it that makes a difference between constructive feedback and destructive feedback? More specifically, what in us happens when we're in a situation, we're in a conversation, and somebody's offering us a perspective that's different from ours. They're maybe mirroring or reflecting some feedback that is critical, but it's constructive. And there's moments where we've all experienced this, where we're like so available to receive that feedback. We're actually humbled by it. We're grateful for it. And it's empowering to us. Like there's this collaborative part of that feedback that we receive that we can use to motivate us to go forward in an even more confident and clear way. And then there's other times, right? There are times when somebody tries to offer you, maybe of the best intentions, some sort of feedback, and you automatically go into defensive mode. You can't even hear it. You go straight into your lizard brain, and you're not even able to critically think. You can't even take it into consideration because you're just armored and defensive. I feel like right now with this transit, this might be bringing that up. This might be showing us how we get in our own way, or how we defeat our own ability to critically think through a disagreement. And this can be very, very constructive feedback in and of itself. Noticing what conversations are getting you a little defensive. Is there something happening that's revealing to me a place where I hold myself back, where I keep myself stuck because I consciously or unconsciously would rather be right than be happy. So when we think about working smarter, not harder, this Venus square Mars is trying to help us through some sort of creative tension or intellectual disagreement. It's trying to help support us to find new ways not to collapse into an agree to disagree, where we just shut down and we say there is no middle point. Is there an invitation here for me to kind of take a step back and look at myself, look at this dead end that I'm claiming during this disagreement as a potential doorway to move through a creative or intellectual tension, to birth better questions, to sharpen my insights, or maybe encourage more dynamic relationships that invite duality, that invite disagreement into the equation of collaboration. And I have some of these questions or contemplations that you can sit with, or maybe hear before you go into that transit. Maybe you remember them. Maybe you write them on a sticky note and post them on your mirror, on your desk, so that when the phone call comes, you're ready to show up. And not get baited into an energy draining disagreement or misunderstanding. So here they are. What would it be like to accept disagreement and seek deeper understanding? What values or needs might we each both be protecting separately beneath our different viewpoints? Do we have a shared goal or care that's under the surface of this disagreement? If we are in a disagreement, if there is this misunderstanding that seems like there's no coming together, no agreeing on this, what is it that we're disagreeing on? Are we disagreeing on the what, on the how, or on the why? Maybe all three. And what would it take to move from defensiveness into curiosity on either side? Noticing that, being open for that. What does it cost me to hold my position of disagreement versus what might it give me to soften around it? This is really important one to pay attention to. What are you gaining by holding your position, or what do you tell yourself you're gaining? And what is it that you could gain if you softened? And this is where we come back to that thinking long term. This is about working smarter, not harder. If something's not working and you're so stuck on needing to do something a specific way, to implement a strategy the way you see is right, what would it be like if you let that go? What would it be like if you gave yourself permission to just do it the way it works, the smarter way, not the harder way? And then, can we value different things without devaluing each other? Where are we being called to refine or relax our grip? Our grip of opinion, our grip of certainty, or maybe even judgment. And then finally, what would it be like if I didn't have to resolve this misunderstanding in this moment, knowing that both of us have our resource, our person in charge, Mercury, retrograde right now? What would it be like if we both said, you know what, let's put a pause on this. Let's step away on our own independently. Let's maybe go back to some of the questions I offered you here, do some of our work, clear any clutter, and then circle back to the conversation in a little bit. Maybe even especially on the Mercury Cazimi during that Mercury retrograde, or following the Mercury Cazimi. That's my best advice and intention for everybody and myself, is to really just use whatever's coming up, to not get baited, to not drain my energy in getting into a disagreement or a misunderstanding that leads to a dead end or destruction. To notice that if there's somewhere we feel stuck or I feel stuck, that's the moment I say, ooh, yeah, I need to go hang out with Mercury retrograde for a little bit. Let's circle back. Let's both circle back when we've had a chance to kind of drop our egos for a second and ask ourselves some more questions, open our minds, get a little bit softness around the grip that we have. Overall, hopefully by the end of this week, we are rested as we close this Cancer lunar cycle, because the next episode and the next Leo lunar cycle, it's going to need our full attention. It is going to need us dressed and ready to participate in the really big transits and shifts ahead. It's a dynamic cycle. There's a lot of new things happening and big outer planet activations right before we jump into the next eclipse cycle. This is not the cycle to shy away from where we're being invited to show up. A reminder to subscribe and turn on your notifications for this channel so that you can be notified as soon as that next episode comes out and we jump into the Leo new moon and Leo lunar cycle. If you're somebody who's looking for more support, I have so many different levels of offerings, from webinars to an astrology calendar that integrates into your phone. I've got custom Spotify playlists, and then of course my one-on-one consultations and client work. All of those offerings, all of those levels of support are linked for you below this video, so go ahead and check those out. You can always reach out if you have any questions. I want to say thank you guys so much for being here with me. If this was your first time or your repeat time, no matter what, I'm just so grateful to have you here and be on this crazy astro ride of 2025 together. I'm Sarah Paasch, and I will see you next week, next lunar cycle.